or North Island Powell River.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to let you know that I will be splitting my time with the member from Winnipeg Centre. Mr. Speaker, just a few minutes ago, I saw the headline that just came out. Liberal government set to miss 2030 emissions targets, says Environment Commissioner audit. I found it interesting as I read the article, and I want to quote the article. The audit said it had expected to find specific targets for how much each of the measures it implemented would cut emissions, but found there was no targets for 95% of those measures. Without expected emission reductions transparently available in the plan, it is not possible to know which of the mitigation measures to reduce emissions were key, the audit said. Mr. Speaker, we are in a climate emergency. Every day we're seeing the change of our environment. This summer, I watched as many communities across my province of British Columbia were on fire. People were fleeing in circumstances that I cannot even begin to imagine. In this province, we've seen communities destroyed by a river that literally fell out of the sky. This is happening, and the expenses of this are phenomenal. So here we are today. We have an actual motion that addresses some of these issues, that understands that the seriousness of what is happening on this in our climate has gone beyond the pale, that we are at an existential crisis that we need to make right. We need that action. We also know that in this circumstance, we're seeing Canadians struggle with the cost of living. And at the same time that everyday Canadians that I talk to across my region are struggling, they're trying so hard to keep up to costs. We know that Canada's biggest corporations, including the oil and gas sector, are seeing record profits, unlike anything they've seen for about 30 years. So we need to address climate and what's happening. And we also have to acknowledge that our society is becoming one that is simply, in my opinion, unfair. And everyday people are working hard. They're not getting ahead because the ultra wealthy are scooping up the excess and leaving the ordinary Canadians that work so hard behind. So this motion asks this place to remove the GST from all forms of home heating. This is something the NDP has been working on for a very, very long time, to have GST removed from all forms of home heating. In fact, there's been multiple motions that the Conservatives have made in the House where we have tried to amend those to make sure that we could see the GST included in these. We have also done a lot of work on trying to get this place to understand that one of the things that we need to do, Mr. Speaker, is finance the changes that we're seeing greatly needed across this country by placing a tax on excess profits of oil and gas corporations and holding to account, of course, places like grocery stores that are making a credible amount of profit off the backs of everyday Canadians. We know that Canadians across this country in North Island Powell River are scraping by, and they're cutting back, and they're trying to make ends meet, and it feels like it's absolutely impossible. And they deserve a break on their heating bills wherever they live across this country, not just particular parts of this country. And here we are in this reality, and we need to see action taken. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to come back to the fact that the NDP has called on the Liberals and, in fact, the Conservatives to remove the GST tax off of home heating. In fact, we did that on multiple amendments that we offered to the Conservatives when they had motions before the House. For me, one of the reasons this was incredibly important is, as a British Columbian, I know that the solutions, so-called solutions that the Conservatives are offering, leave BC out. The reality is, and it's common knowledge, Mr. Speaker, that there is a provincial process for carbon pricing here in BC and not a federal one. So when the federal carbon pricing is removed, it actually doesn't have an impact in British Columbia. And that really concerns me because the people in my riding are struggling. They need a bit of a break, and the GST would actually offer them one that was consistent and reliable that people could have some faith in. So here we are in this situation, and I don't know why. I don't know why the Conservatives keep leaving BC out. They keep leaving Quebec out and the Northwest Territories as well. So I find that confusing, Mr. Speaker, and hopefully we'll figure that out. And I think about not only the huge cost of dealing with climate change across this country, but the human cost. In my riding during the summer, when we saw a lot of those significant forest fires, volunteer firefighters from my riding, from communities like Port McNeill, Port Hardy, Campbell River, Comox, Powell River, probably more, Mr. Speaker, all went out to help. They took their time, they went out there and they fought fires because there's just not enough people to do that work. So these people are making significant sacrifices away from their families, their health and well-being, and they're doing it because this is what's happening. And their health and well-being matters to me. And so does the future of this planet and the health and well-being of our children. So here we are in this climate emergency. People can't afford the basic necessities, and it's only going to get worse if we don't see some significant work done on both sides of this. We know that small communities, especially in my riding, if they have to face a forest fire or some sort of natural disaster that's happening due to climate change, they often have one road out of the community or they just have the ocean. We are living in a rainforest with drought again and again, year after year. It's very concerning. And we also know that this Liberal government keeps saying that they're going to do things. We talked about that at the beginning when we see the commissioner saying there's no real targets that we can follow that is actually going to show a consistent movement towards meeting those goals. And we know that it has to be dealt with quickly. And home housing helps with that. Canada, in fact, has committed to more than 10% of home heating to be used by heat pumps by 2023 in order to achieve the commitments for the emissions reduction plan. Right now, we're only at 6%. So what we need to do is by 2030, to get to that 10%, there has to be about 560,000 heat pumps installed across the country. That's about 70,000 a year. So I believe this year we're just over 400. So we're nowhere near where we need to get to. So this is about a motion about fairness. It's about making sure that everybody gets a little bit of help during this time of profound financial challenges. It means having stability. And it's time for us to see that action. We know that what the Liberals are announcing is temporary pausing of heat, oil in all provinces and taking away the tax on that until 3 years is up and doing some of these things, but it doesn't actually look at across the country and what we could do. And we need to see the heat pump program actually be a lot more resilient. It needs to be affordable for everyday Canadians. And, I heard a member talking earlier about, it's going out to the middle class. Well, the costs that are increasing right now, the middle class is hurting profoundly. And the class below that are struggling in ways that we can't even imagine. So if we're going to take this seriously, we need to be addressing both things at the same time. How to make sure there's a bar of dignity that people in this country don't fall below, and how to make sure we're addressing the climate crisis at a rate that is actually going to get those emissions down and see us progress. We're not seeing that in this country. We're not seeing the federal government actually commit to this, and we need to get it done. It is time for, Mr. Speaker, for the ultra-rich to start paying their fair share. So we're going to fight hard, and we're going to continue to do that, to say the oil and gas industry making huge profits while so much gas costs are going high, we need to make it right. So I thank you so much, and I hope that people will reconsider and vote for this motion.